Today, the topic is capital punishment in Tennessee after the conviction. And we have with us Dr. ACharvat4, who is a sociologist and a person who has some information relative to what happens in capital defense cases and capital punishment cases after the individual has been convicted but not yet executed. And of course, Dr. ACharvat4, let's give you an opportunity to pick up at the point that we left off last time.
Well, I guess what's most important to me is that the theory that guides this work, social bonding theory, it's a theory that I utilized initially in my research to try to identify the elements of preventing and deterring domestic violence. When I first began the work, the real issue around capital punishment became deterrence, or that's what one would hear a lot. And the harsher the punishment, according to this theory, is not the thing that deters crime. According to this theory, it's a stake in conformity that would deter crime. And those who have a stake tend to commit less criminal acts. And those with no stake in conformity tend to commit a lot of criminal acts and murders. And so primarily what I did initially on the way to trial was a study of the life course that identified elements of the social bond that would have deterred the crime or deterred the development of a criminal career. After the crime becomes another issue, because then you've got a long history of an individual living within a structured environment, oftentimes a change in life, a change in all of the issues that led them to prison. So that's where this became a fascinating study for me, and it occurred to me that not only is this germane in terms of people facing death sentences, but it would also be significant in determining who was a good candidate for parole. And with the recidivism rate so irregular and high, I am convinced that there would be a way to study an individual
who has been incarcerated for a long period of time, and you could make some decision in terms of whether or not that individual ought to be given parole. I mean, would that be the outcome of such an activity?
If I were in a position to grant parole, there are questions I would want to have answered about that individual and about the social environment that I was returning that individual to live in, whether or not the debt had been paid, and whether or not that was the sentiment of the community that was about to receive the individual.
Now, but now, is it possible, and I think you introduced earlier off camera, what you call the governor's a formal paper that was written dealing with the governor of the state of Tennessee and parole and whatever. Why don't you explain that to our audience and as well as to myself this morning?
Guidelines for pardons, commutations, and reprieves. And essentially, we don't hear very much in Tennessee anymore about pardons. When I first came to Tennessee, there was a lot of information about pardons because there had been corruption and scandal. But it is statutorily identified that the governor, or actually